Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Learning from the Pros. Joining me today is Chris Konowal, and he's going to be sharing his top 10 tips on making your ads work outside of the ad platforms. Welcome, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Silvio. Appreciate it.
I'm pumped to dive in. We recently connected. You're a student of ad conversion, and one of the things that excites me so much about ad conversion is like how much talent is in the academy. And I was like inspired where I'm like, okay, I want to meet these people that I don't know, like these hidden gems like yourself. So I'm really excited to hear your top 10 tips on making ads work outside of the ad platform because this is such a huge miss. Most people, when they're, I know I'm guilty about this, especially earlier on in my career, when you're thinking about improving the effectiveness of your ads, you only think about what data you have available in front of you and whatever that platform is reporting. So it's going to be really interesting to see what you have cooking for us. But before you get into it, can you just kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did you get into advertising?
Yeah. So I'm from the Philly area on the East Coast, and I got into advertising end of kind of my college career, senior year. I had no idea what I wanted to do, which is not great for a graduating senior. Luckily, I found the world of paid media, found out that I really enjoyed it, so then dove directly into my agency career, spent about 6 years there, and recently have gone out on my own to kind of take my own spin on helping clients in the paid media world.
Congrats.
Um, Appreciate that. So that's what I've been digging deep into and working on over the past few months.
That's amazing. We will link Chris's socials as well beneath this video and his websites. If you want to work with him, definitely check him out. So, Chris, are you ready to get started? Want to kick us
Let's
off
get
with tip
into
number
it.
one?
Yeah. So tip number one, and these are in no order of priority, but I would say lean into the page path report in GA4 to understand what pages visitors commonly navigate to before converting. I've found that this is really enlightening, especially in the B2B space when it's rare someone sees one page and converts. So it can often be helpful to
Mm,
understand like, oh, like people are, they're ending up on my landing page, but then 90% of people visit my pricing page before they convert. So it's like, okay, if I can include pricing information in my ads on my landing page, can I make it easier for them and capture that extra couple percentage points? So a lot of insights that are there. I know GA4 gets a lot of hate, but I've found it to be very useful.
that's a great tip. Adding on to that, what I've done in the past is I always recommend people install a tool like Hotjar so you can see session
Yeah.
recordings and then you can see where they're leaving your landing page and then what areas they're exploring on your site. And then that can inform sections that you add onto your landing page of concerns that you're not probably addressing right now. I haven't really dove too much into the page path report, so that's a huge nugget that I definitely want to look into.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, everyone knows that the buyer journey is not linear. So instead of trying to force it to be, allow people to explore and see what they're exploring around.
Right on. Tip number two.
Cool. Tip number two is use more than one data source to measure performance. A good place that I like to
Mm,
usually start is in-platform metrics plus GA4 again, plus CRM data. I think this is even more relevant with the deprecation of third-party cookies. Not going to be as responsible to just lean on in-platform metrics. So using a triangulation approach to say like, hey, I'm seeing this happen with these three different data sources paints a much clearer picture of what is actually going on. So again, getting out of the ad platforms, using other data sources to see what's happening and make decisions.
huge. It's like in the product world when you're gonna, like me with the background in product, it's like when you work with great product leaders, if you're gonna make a recommendation on a big feature to push, ideally you have at least three supporting data points to back up that request. So
Yeah.
it's almost like, in the inverse there, like in marketing and advertising context, it's like before making that big decision of should I increase, should I withdraw, should I invest, leverage multiple data points to be able to make that decision.
Yep. And especially now, there will always be gaps in reporting for probably each of those approaches. So you can kind of fill those in to a certain extent. And at the end of the day, hopefully make your paid media programs look better. I mean, not look better than they are, but reveal how impactful they actually are.
Mm, right on. Tip number
Cool.
three.
For my third tip, related to a point you just brought up, but work with product or service teams to design a lead magnet that customers actually want. So when we're talking about B2B, especially the software space, people don't really love ebooks and webinars, as much as they used to. I know that's a
What do you
pretty
mean?
standard
I thought
approach.
everybody
Yeah.
loves that.
Outside of my own personal feelings, the data that I've seen working with clients reflects this as well. And I don't think it's necessarily that the ebooks themselves are not valuable, but I'm sure you've seen it too. You download one ebook and then you've got 30 sales emails in the next 2 days. You sign up for a webinar, you spend 20 minutes only to realize that it's a sales pitch or a demo in disguise. And it's like, this is
Mm,
just frustrating. I feel deceived. So, it only takes that to happen one or two times on the buyer side to ruin it for the buyer. And regardless of companies having good intentions and not leaning into those practices, it's not going to help. So, developing an offer lead magnet that customers actually want can be really powerful. And I found that flipping the risk reward ratio on its head in favor of prospects is what I've seen be successful. So instead of like, hey, here's an ebook that you may get something out of, you may not get something out of a demo, where the company gets the lead information, they can bombard you. It's like, hey, here's a resource, here's a workshop, whatever, where you can leave this interaction and immediately improve your situation. Sure, company might get your email or whatever it is, but
hmm
it's worth it because you can walk away with like, hey, here's steps one, two, three that I'm going to use and be better tomorrow than I am today.
I'm selfishly asking this question. So lead magnet, you're giving away some sort of valuable piece of content, right, in exchange for somebody to opt
Mhm.
in. Oftentimes in B2B, like to your point around like ebooks and guides, do you see these lead magnets being effective in terms of like actually creating pipeline? Or or I guess what's been your experience when you do tailor this in the right way?
Yeah. So I think a key point that I want to hit on there is you mentioned content and transparently again, within me kind of coming to this realization over the past, I would say 2 to 3 months, I found that content very rarely converts to pipeline. It's probably like under 5%. And again, depends on the content as you add a bunch of different touch points. We can get into that nuance later. But in terms of like one-to-one lead magnet to pipeline, I've found that meetings is a lot more powerful. So it's like structuring a meeting that is not a sales pitch. So instead of saying like, hey, do you want to get on the phone and talk about this thing I'm trying to sell you? It's, hey, do you want to get on the phone? I'll solve these three problems for you. And like, that's that. So again, it's not a pitch in
Mm,
disguise. It's like, let me actually solve problems for you. And you're not going to solve everything because that's kind of like the upsell. But again, a prospect can enter that meeting or that interaction, actually become better than they were before, and be like, oh, there
mm,
is no hidden agenda. I can now go back to my team, my business, make improvements. And then ideally, it's like when they see that that is only part of the picture, they go back to the business to say, hey, you helped me before. Now I want to dive deeper in with you. And that's where I've seen across clients that we've seen success because that face-to-face piece, and again, in like a 30-minute call, you can provide a lot more value than an ebook that is not as nuanced as an individual
hmm
prospect's problems or situation may be.
That's a writer downer. How do you design a meeting experience where your prospects leave better off than when they came?
Yeah, for sure. We
Money.
can probably spend, a few hours diving into that,
Yeah.
but I've seen it be pretty
Yeah.
successful.
Awesome. So tip number four.
Cool. Number four is, again, on the theme of customers, meet with the sales and customer success teams to collect customer research. I found it that it's not always as easy or straightforward when you're working in like the freelancer or agency space to get access to a client's customers, right? It makes sense. They want to hold on to them for legal privacy reasons. But the next best place that I found to get insights is meeting with sales or customer success teams since they talk to customers all the time. I think in the marketing world, that's relatively self-explanatory in terms of the value there, but having those direct insights dramatically impacts how you form
Mhm.
positioning, messaging, audiences, campaign strategy, all that good stuff.
It's the things you know you should do, but don't. Like we were
Yep,
briefly talking about this before the call recording.
exactly. Yeah,
100%.
good hygiene that you just need to send out that meeting request and run through it.
Hmm. That's great. Tip number 5.
Tip number 5 is to see the product in action. So whether that is software or even some sort of service delivery, seeing a demo, sitting in on a meeting can go miles because as you are trying to develop ad copy or figure out what you're talking about when promoting a client's product, without actually seeing it kind of virtually getting your hands on it can be really difficult. And I found that sitting in those meetings, taking the time to get that context really changes the way that I can then communicate the value of the product or service to my clients, prospects, and customers.
So you yourself seeing the product, experiencing it, getting to know how it works. So then
Yep.
you can then, of course, better market it because you actually understand the nuances and the insights, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I've sat with like customer success teams. I'm like, hey, consider me someone that just onboarded. Run me through the platform.
Mm.
Or like, hey, we've got an app that does XYZ. Can I get access to the app? And I'll poke around like I'm a customer. So yeah, it definitely changes the way that I look at not only what we're trying to promote, but like, oh, I'm thinking of a potential gap here. Like, have you thought of that? And not always, because again, it's a fresh set of eyes, kind of like that beginner's luck phenomenon.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's huge, especially in the SaaS world where, you have all these different teams and they all have their own roles and responsibilities, and it can be quite siloed depending on the organization. There's a lot of marketers that are watching this right now, and don't take this as like a slight or anything. Just think of it as like an opportunity for growth. But where you're working at a company and you're marketing a product that you yourself have never even actually opened or experienced, which
Yeah.
is crazy. And I understand the sentiment. Like if you're, when I used to work in the maintenance management space and I used to promote maintenance management software, I'm not, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
went through the product and I was able to see what it looks like, the dashboard, get those different sections is huge. If you're not sold on your product, how can you sell it to someone else? Is kind of how I think about it. And when,
exactly.
like when you break it down. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
And I
insight.
think if, you were thrown into the fire and you're on a sales call and you can't even answer like what is the product and what does it do, then it's going to be very difficult for you to market that product.
Hmm, totally. What are we, tip 6?
Yes. So continuing on the theme of working outside of the ad platforms, this one has to do with data, but CRM data. So getting familiar with CRM data is very important. I would say three metrics in particular. One, pipeline to spend ratio. Two, average time to close. And three, average deal size. I found that coming from the agency world, one, even getting CRM access was pretty uncommon. And as I've gone out on my own, it makes a world of difference in terms of the context you can have, not only in, again, creating relevant campaigns, but then being able to speak to clients using the same language that they use. I'm sure, as you know very well, as does your audience, that just saying, hey, we had 20 conversions this month oftentimes means nothing to a business versus like,
Mm,
hey, we built pipeline, we did so with X amount of spend, we're projecting it to close in this many days, weeks, months, and that's what our estimated revenue will be. Just changes one, the conversations, they move a lot quicker, I've found, because instead of you saying like, hey, we had 20 conversions, it's like, okay, well now we have to translate that, take a few minutes to do that. So conversations move more quickly, but then clients can also see you as more of a strategic partner where it's like, oh, they get how my business works and how I make money and what it takes to get to our goals. So
hmm.
again, a process that like I'm still always evolving and learning, having conversations with my clients around like how do they qualify what generates pipeline? Like how can we estimate these things? But once you have that down, it becomes a really powerful tool in communication.
Critical, critical. If you're hiring an agency or a freelancer to run your ads and they are not asking for some way to get insight into the data of your CRM, that is a red flag, ladies and gentlemen, and you need to look the
Yep.
other way. That is critical. You could have the greatest advertiser of all time in your account, the Yoda of ads, if you will, in
Hmm.
your account, managing your campaigns. And if they're not able to tie that connectivity, like all that activity back to revenue, they cannot help you. It is so imperative. So I love that you brought that out.
Yeah,
Are
and
we
kind of as
on
a
tip 7?
yes, and I think this
All right,
plays
7.
into a bit of like the CRM and other teams aspect is get regular insights from the sales team, specifically what they're doing on a communication perspective, whether they're doing emailing, cold calling, etc., as well as messaging. Because I've seen in my own experience, as well as just doing research, that oftentimes marketing and sales can operate in silos of like they're both going to market, but they're doing different things in slight variations. So, one, aligning the two is an ideal world, but even if you are running on your own tracks, having like a monthly, quarterly connect, or even just download from your main point of contact of like, hey, what has the sales team been up to? Like, these are the insights that they're seeing. These are the channels that are working for them. These are the talking points that seem to really resonate well with customers. And tying the last tip back to this one, like even diving into CRM sales notes is great for little
Mm,
nuggets of like, that makes sense. Now I'm going to adjust my copy, my landing page, my targeting. So again, all these outside sources that influence what you do in the platforms themselves.
I love that so much. Just a quick added tip there for everyone listening. If you have a large enough list, you can build audiences off of those closed loss disposition reasons and then run ads to those different segments of users, assuming the list size is large enough. So, for example, like at one company I was at, people would close loss because of certain features. So, a product gap. And once we had those new enhancements to the product, we could create a audience based of people who close loss because of like the gap in the product, and then run ads with our new product feature announcement to those individuals. So now they're aware of it, and then our team would outbound to them to try to restart that deal.
Yeah, see, never would have known that without CRM access and insight into the sales team.
Damn right. That's right. Tip number 8.
Cool. So tip number 8 is pivoting away slightly from the theme of the CRM and working with other teams and more focused still on working within your own marketing team, whether that be internally or your marketing POCs. And the tip is to work with other marketing team members to build a case study or business case rather behind the value of awareness media. I think being in like the marketing world and in the B2B space, it is very intuitive to marketers as to why building awareness, if you want to call it demand gen, whatever, is
Hmm.
valuable. But not every CEO or CFO understands the value of that, and rightfully so because they're not marketers. So using data to build a case around, hey, if we can promote these different pieces of thought leadership, generate an audience of 100,000 people. We then have plans to retarget them in this way using our estimated click-through and conversion rates. That maps back to X in pipeline, Y in revenue. So like here's the value all the way up the funnel of awareness
Mm.
is really important because again, people will always get pushed back on that. Like, what do you mean we're spending money and the goal isn't to generate revenue? So
Yeah.
adding the data behind it can be really powerful.
That's everything, Chris. I love that you're touching on this. One practical tip, like adding on to that, in my experience, I had this one client. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. I'm getting flashbacks. I was mentioning to them like, hey, we need to create awareness in the market, and they
Hmm.
were much more enterprise. We wanted to launch a proper ABM
Yeah.
strategy, and anywho, with them, one of the things that I did that was helpful to get buy-in in terms of making that case around, hey, why we need to build our retargeting audiences further was looking at the performance of our existing remarketing campaigns and comparing them
Yeah.
to our cold prospecting ones and showing them, hey, look, do you see if somebody's already familiar with us, we're getting this return on click-through rates in terms of engagement and direct conversions, et cetera. And that's a good
Hmm.
way, an easy way for you to be able to get more buy-in if you're dealing with smaller marketing audiences. And you logically know as the marketer, hey, probably makes more sense we get more people aware of us, so they're in this
Yeah.
pool, right?
Yeah. And I think another quick example there is that's really good to hit on like when you have the data, but when you're working with a company who is just starting out and has a newer marketing program, maybe doesn't even have the site traffic to run remarketing yet. looking at, again, like GA4 or your CRM and seeing where your leads are being attributed from, chances are you'll see a very large portion attributed from direct traffic. By default, that means they had to have heard of you from somewhere else. So in order
Mm,
to even get those direct traffic leads, you need to do something elsewhere.
that's a great point. Man, I hope you guys are enjoying all of the fire tips. All right, let's go
Doing
on
my
to
best.
tip number 9.
Yep. So this one is incorporate leading indicators as a part of what success looks like. Similar to what we just chatted through, B2B campaigns don't always convert right away, and sometimes they're not intended to. So especially for those businesses that have a much longer sales cycle, months, even in some cases, map out what those leading indicators look like because it's going to be difficult to pitch getting budget to run a campaign and basically saying, we're going to sit on our hands for 6 months until we know what happened. So building in those leading indicators of like, hey, engagement should look like this. Site traffic should
Mm,
look like this. Lead volume should look like this. Lead to MQL, SQL, etc. should look like this. So that even after a few weeks, you can start making adjustments to like your creative and your lead optimization process, things like that, which are all really helpful, can be done in and out of platforms as well.
amazing. I actually, one thing that I've done that's, especially when you're communicating with people that are not in this space, there's a lot of technical jargon that goes into this, like
Hmm.
engagement rate and click-through rate and all this. And to them, they may or may not understand what that means. So one thing that I've done that I found works really well is you can do this in Canva. It doesn't have to be complicated, but map out a visualization of a funnel and
Yeah.
have those different steps that you're mentioning, like the engagement rate or even the click-through rate, like map it out in the funnel from the ad impression to what they want, close one revenue. So oftentimes these C-suite executives, they know the sales funnel pretty well. That's
Yeah.
their main core focus. But once you can create a simple visual and connect the ad funnel with the actual sales funnel, then they can see why these metrics matter because how it allows you to understand, like, if they don't do this, then they're not going to go to do this, and then they won't likely do that, and ultimately they will
Hmm.
not connect to revenue. And just creating like a simple little visual has been killer for me in the past when I needed to present these things to
Yeah.
C-suite folks.
Agreed. Yeah. My brain is a giant spreadsheet basically, so that's how I map everything out. Um, but same concept and has definitely been effective in those conversations.
Right on. All right, the final tip number 10.
So, kind of a summary of a lot of these, it is just practice being patient. As we talked about a few times, the B2B world does not move as quickly as some other industries. It's not like you're spending $100 a day on selling t-shirts or drink coasters and seeing all that money come right back. It takes time for people, buyers, to research, make decisions, talk to their
Mm,
teams. It's been interesting to, again, look at attribution and see like we're getting traffic, but it's direct traffic because someone clicked on our landing page link from a Microsoft Teams chat. So that's telling me like people are sharing our, clients' pages in their Teams chat, like, hey, check this out, things like that.
yeah.
So it doesn't happen overnight. Build out your measurement system, bake in your leading indicators, but again, it's going to take some time to see those dollar signs at the end.
What would you say for, I'm just thinking and putting myself in the shoes of somebody listening to this. Maybe they're getting into paid ads, they want to use it at their company, and they don't know what they don't know, right? They're
Yeah.
starting from zero. Like they're like, okay, I need to be patient. I get that. This is not a quick fix. I need to figure it out. What would you say is like, I guess how should they know if they're headed in the right track and if it's time to give up?
So I think running through the exercise that you and I just talked about in the previous tip of like build out your model, use the data that you do have available to say, if someone sees this ad, and then I retarget them with this ad, and use all your metrics, bake it out. Like what has to happen for you to get to each stage? Eventually, you'll have this little model that you can use, and that's your guide, right? So it's like, hey, if at 2 weeks I need to be at 10,000 site visitors in order to make the economics of the rest of my funnel work, and at 2 weeks you're at 5,000, it's like, okay, my creative probably sucks because people are not engaging with it. So I need to go fix that. And that's a really good way to use your leading indicators along with like your funnel breakdown to say, this is my plan. These are how I can use different data points at each point in the plan to know when something isn't going the right way.
Right on. Right on. I hope you guys are picking up how often Chris is talking about data, models, KPIs. If you don't have this, you're gambling, you're not investing. And the most successful advertisers, they think like investors and they execute like scientists, right? You need to think like an investor first, understand your model, your different steps in your sales process, your funnel, and then you need to go to market and actually start to execute your campaigns methodically like a scientist where you're weighting against a control and you're trying to understand if I do this thing, will it lead towards the objective that I want and ultimately get you to where you need to be. So I absolutely love that. And I purposely asked him because I wanted to reinforce all of the points that you've made
Yeah.
around the necessity of looking at all these different data points so that you can understand, what is it, the force between the forest or the trees, as the analogy goes.
Yeah, exactly. Again, can't, as you said, can't stress the importance of data enough. At one point in my career, took not necessarily a detour, but a little adventure into the data analytics world, and has really paid me dividends ever since. Just understanding how data works, how to model it out, and then it helps you dissect like those little optimizations. So bring it all back to like what we do in platform. It's like, okay, this metric, according to like this stage in my breakdown, is telling me maybe our landing page sucks. I need to work on that this week. It's a really good way to focus your efforts and then make sure that they're impactful versus just throwing optimizations at the wall because you saw it on LinkedIn or in an article.
100%. Totally agree. Chris, thank you so much for being here and sharing your 10 tips with everyone. If they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, and then I've got a weekly newsletter, which I guess we'll be sharing in the links somewhere here.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much. I hope everybody got value from this. If you're liking this series, this is a brand new series we're kicking off. Let us know by responding to this email, or if you're watching this on LinkedIn, drop a comment down below. Your feedback is great for us to be able to associate our data points and understand if this is resonating and if we should be moving forward and doing more of this. Thanks again for being here, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Savio. This was fun.